Now, Val's been waiting long enough, even though he's a man, out there in Vienna. Val, thanks a lot for joining us.
I'll pretend to be a woman next time, George. Maybe I'll...
That's all right, son. Go on.
Yes, I'm here in Vienna, unfortunately. First of all, I'll admit I'm completely biased. I really do not like dogs. I've been afraid of them for my whole life. It's a phobia, call it irrational. But here in Vienna, every single last dog, 99%, do wear a muzzle. And I have to say, I nearly fell off my chair when you were speaking to that gentleman, I forget his name, who said, well, George, would you like a muzzle?
They'll never muzzle me, Val.
Well, indeed, but I mean, exactly, you're not going to get down on all fours and endanger the life of potentially a very young child.
Exactly.
And bear in mind, of course, senior citizens wouldn't stand a chance.
Not a chance, no, not a chance.
Not a hope in hell.
Val, I've been attacked by a Doberman pinscher.
Oh, God.
And I'll tell you, it was the most terrifying experience of my life, and I've been under aerial bombardment, I've been in war zones, I've had bullets whizzing around me, I've seen people die in front of me, but the attack from a Doberman was the most frightening experience of my life.
I do not.
I was absolutely rooted to the spot and totally incapable of movement. I had no idea what to do. This dog was so much more capable of inflicting violence on me than I was on it, for several moments.
Right, I mean, okay, so the muzzling issue works, but unfortunately, if we're to be absolutely blunt about this, the Austrians are generally irresponsible people. The British and the Irish, and I'm Irish, we are less so, and passing a law which insists on every dog being forced to wear a muzzle simply will not work. I'm afraid there are certain species of dogs, like pit bull terriers and other terrifying animals, who seemingly intelligent people want to own while simultaneously having a small kid, whose ability to breed should be, I think, taken away, which is possible.
Well, you say it wouldn't be enforceable, but it would be if every dog that was found without a muzzle, its owner was severely fined, and the dog was taken off them. That would be, I think, quite quickly enforceable.
Well, you're covering attacks in the public arena, George. Don't forget there have been some horrible incidents in private.
That's true. I mean, if it was up to me, Val, as I said, 6 million dogs, at least 5.5 million too many for me. We need guide dogs for blind people. We need police dogs for the police. We may need some dogs for the armed forces. We perhaps need a pooch or two to keep, like the little old lady of 83, happy of an evening.
Yes, indeed.
But what are the other 5.5 million for?
Well, apparently they provide us with friendship. Listen, can I raise a totally unrelated issue with you?
Of course, Val.
Yes, and you've been singing the praises of Che Guevara tonight. I just always wanted to...
A good Irishman as well, Val.
Indeed, as they all are, George, as you know. How can you, as someone who's clearly a supporter of Cuba and the administration, if we can call it that, which controls the island, how do you explain the pattern of migration between Cuba and Miami?
Well, the same way I explained the pattern of migration from Ireland to the United States of America. That's a very strange question for an Irishman to ask. My ancestors left Ireland, not because they didn't love Ireland, but because they were starving in Ireland, because it was richer across the Irish Sea. And thousands sailed, as you know, hundreds of thousands sailed, and are now millions in the United States of America, because it's a richer country. People emigrate from poor countries to rich countries. The question you need to answer, Val, is Cuba comparable as a poor country with other poor countries in its region and around the world, or does it outperform them in all key indices of civilization? That's the comparison, Val, not between Cuba and the United States of America, but between Cuba and, let's just pluck one at random, shall we, Haiti, which you can see on a clear day, by the way, from Cuba, which is a sink of misery and mass hunger and mass homelessness and disease and a total sea of immiseration. Val?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a very, very pessimistic, a characteristically socialist, pessimistic view of the world, George. Cuba has the potential to be every bit as wealthy as America. I've met Cubans, and so have you.
How can you say that? In 1959, when the Cuban Revolution took place, Cuba was a complete basket case under an American-supported dictator who allowed the United Fruit Corporation and other US multinationals and the mafia not only to loot the island of its resources, but to prostitute virtually the entire island of Cuba, and that was only 60 years ago. That was only 50 years ago, Val. And in 50 years, Cuba now has a greater life expectancy in Havana than exists in Washington, higher levels of infant survival than exists in Washington, a health service which, if you've seen Michael Moore and other great Irishmen's wonderful film Sicko, you will have seen puts America to shame in just 1959 to 2008. That's not a bad result, Val.
But they don't have hope, George. I'd rather live a shorter, happier...
Wait a minute. You live a long life, your children don't die, you have 100% literacy, not a single child on your island has to go to work rather than school. You outperform countries 5, 6, 10 times your size in the Olympic Games. You have a ballet which is world famous. You have a country which millions flock to for holidays, but you got no hope. What are you talking about, man?
Well, first of all, I want to make it clear I have never and will not go to that island until the regime disappears.
Well, millions of others have, and all come back with a positive report. The vast majority of them, Val. I'll make a call out for people who've been there if you like.
Not very many of them want to move there, though, do they? And that's the bottom line, isn't it? It's a pattern of human migration.
That's because we live in a rich country and Cuba is a poor country.
And why is it a poor country?
It's a poor country because it's in the third world. It was vastly more poor before Che Guevara and Fidel Castro liberated the island. Vastly more poor. Let's talk about life expectancy, which is now longer than the United States, the richest country in the world. It was 20 years less before the Cuban Revolution. Let's talk about the expectancy of your child to live. Cuba has lower levels of infant mortality than the United States of America. What do you think infant mortality was like before the Cuban Revolution? Or let's talk about literacy. Cuba had 65% illiteracy in 1959 and now has 0% illiteracy. We could go on, Val, you and me, but you're not getting the best of this argument, mate.
Well, sure, but I mean, I'm not quite as experienced as you are. But listen, I come back to the issue of hope. You keep reiterating these issues of literacy and life expectancy, and I don't deny any of these things. But every human has a need to strive and succeed to the maximum possible ability that they have. And that is denied them in Cuba.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's just... Look, Val, have you seen the Dead Poets Society? Do you remember when Robin Williams, as a brilliant teacher, gets up on the desk and gets his pupils standing up on the desk and says, look how different everything looks from this angle. Your problem is, you're looking at Cuba as someone who doesn't believe in the socialist idea from a different perspective from what the Cubans look at it. How you can seriously say that a country which has made these advances in health, education, literacy, life expectancy, infant mortality, culture, and say they don't have hope. Compared to what, Val? Compared to a system that you might be more favourable with. Maybe downtown Miami for the poor. Or Michigan. Flint, Michigan. There you go, Val. Try Flint, Michigan. Try as a poor man in Flint, Michigan, United States of America, to get health care if you can't afford the insurance. See how long you'll live. See how many of your children will survive. Now that is a lack of hope, Val. Ken and Lincoln's up after this.